remember that night? They called. It said that Stacy hadn't got to work.
There's already an aerial search going on.
They found Stacy on the side of a road and a bunch of wildflowers.
Instead of going to Stacy's wedding, now we're going to Stacy's memorial.
She's buried in her wedding dress.
She was really excited about getting married. She really loved Jimmy.
She told me that she wasn't very excited to get married because she was sleeping with a black guy named Rodney. Wow, you need to be careful with this.
They found that Rodney Reed's DNA is identical to the DNA recovered from Stacy Stites' body.
There might be a charge or something.
If Rodney Reed did have a relationship with Stacy Stites, doesn't that complicate your case?
He was a black male having sex with a white girl.
I knew my son had been railroaded. I got to fight these people to save my son's life.
Free Rodney Reed! Free Rodney Reed!
Bastrop, it's a typical small Texas town on the Colorado. It's a town that represents a wide swath of what Texas is all about. Certainly the churches, football on Friday nights.
All Bears Bastrop led 76-9. That is not a typo, folks.
I grew up here. My dad grew up here. My grandparents grew up here. Louisiana has a town named after the same guy that's called Bastrop, but we say Bastrop.
I'm a fifth-generation Bastropian. Bastrop is known as the home of the Lost Pines.
It's an old town, and there's a lot of history. Bastrop was founded by immigrants from the southern United States. They brought enslaved African Americans with them.
In the days of segregation, we as African Americans provided jobs for one another. We had our own barbershops, restaurants. The class of 1970 was the first fully integrated class in Bastrop High School.
In the mid-90s, even at that period of time, the African Americans and the whites were, I think, separated in a lot of ways.
Interracial dating in Bastrop in the 90s existed, but it was something that was hidden and it was dangerous. We've come a long way in some instances, but yet and still, justice is slow in Bastrop County for African Americans.
This morning, 19-year-old Stacy Lee Stites was reported missing.
Family members came from all corners of Texas to comfort Carol Stites. She lost her youngest, Stacy Lee.
She had her plans, and now somebody's taken that away.
I think you just about got it.
Where am I?
Bring it for you,
In the hands, yeah.
Grab it, hold.
There you go.
Yep.
It's been 24 years
Yes.
since you lost your daughter, Stacy. Tell me a little bit about Stacy. Stacy was your youngest of 5.
I found out that I was pregnant with Stacy and had cancer at the same time. And so I put off any drugs or any chemicals to keep that child alive until I had her. Because that soul was more precious to me than mine. From the time she was able to move, she was up and at 'em. She was like the white tornado. That's exactly what they called her when she was little. She was into everything and did everything and friends with everybody.
I was friends with Stacy in high school. We were involved in some church groups and sports together. She was just kind of like a sunflower, sunshine. She was funny. She was always cracking jokes. She didn't really take a lot of things seriously. She was always in the moment. She was looking for what everybody does, young love.
Go away.
Stacy lost her father as a child, and apparently it had quite an impact on her. According to friends and family, she seemed to lose her way for a while.
She ended up pregnant.
She was 15.
Yes, devastating. It took two of my daughters to get me in a room upstairs by myself to let me know what had gone on.
She did decide to give the baby up for adoption.
Every year, Smithville has their jamboree. That's where Stacey met Jimmy Fennell.
He was on duty at the festival, security. And they got to talking, and they talked, and they talked, and they talked. Pretty soon, he was hanging around the house, and they talked and talked.
What did you think of him?
I like Jimmy. He was raised in the church that I was raised in. He's had the same values that I was raised with. I thought he was heaven sent. This guy was here, and it was just about everything that I wanted in a son-in-law.
She was more outgoing. He was a little more conservative, but I thought he was good for her.
That's the picture of her and him. That was at his graduation when he became a policeman.
Jimmy began working for the Giddings Police Department.
Stacey was very excited about their relationship.
Stacey moved in with Jimmy in his apartment upstairs, and Carol lived in the same building downstairs, catty corner to Stacey and Jimmy's apartment.
They moved in together and they said, we're engaged, we're getting married. So that was just about, okay, at least you're getting married. You're not going to live in sin, as I would think of it.
It was going to be a big wedding. She was so excited. She had planned every detail.
Here's the thing for the Georgetown Church of Christ, the fees and the use of the church facilities.
Yeah. She was wanting to make more money for her wedding. She went into HED's groceries company, and they gave her a job in the produce department. And so Stacey had to be at work early in the morning.
She was working hard. Every 2 weeks when she got paid, she was making a payment on the wedding dress.
There was excitement in the beginning, but I think as every day kind of ticked by, it was less and less. I know that it was definitely stressful for her just because she had to work and come home. She was expected to do laundry, clean. For a 19-year-old, that's kind of a big transition.
Did she share any concerns? She didn't share any concerns. That she was really excited about getting married. She really loved Jimmy. You were a little concerned. You were a little emotional before the wedding.
Stress.
And that you cried a couple of times. You thought that Jimmy wasn't quite as...
I was the mother, and Stacey was my daughter, and I expected him to perform the way I wanted him to.
My name is Athena, and we were besties, high school. This is going back in time. Oh, wow. Stacey called me and told me that she's getting engaged and getting married. And Stacey never sounded like a giddy girl in love. She sounded giddy about her wedding and planning her wedding and making things for her wedding. But she never talked about Jimmy.
I think that she started seeing sides of Jimmy that he was very possessive, and it was kind of his way or no way. And I don't know that she was necessarily comfortable with that, so I think that they started butting heads.
Tell me, Carol, when you got the call.
HEB's called. It said that Stacey hadn't got work.
That's the first inkling that something is wrong.
We didn't know what to do. We made flyers and started walking door to door, hoping that we could find her alive.
Tell me about that night before April 22nd. Do you remember that night?
It was normal, everyday evening stuff. This voice that I've heard all my year, and it makes me sound a little nuts, and I call it the Holy Spirit, all my life that I've had guide me. It said, you did a good job, and your job is done. How do you tell your daughter that the thoughts in your mind was, if you was to die today, I can never be more proud of you? How do you tell that to someone?
We know that Jimmy Fennell was at Little League practice From around 5 in the evening on April 22nd, 1996, at around 8 o'clock p.m., Carol saw Jimmy come home from Little League practice.
Carol actually saw Jimmy and Stacy meet outside and have sort of an embrace outside of her window. Of course, she lives downstairs. And she saw Stacy walking with Jimmy, laughing and joking as they went up the stairs to their apartment.
The last words out of her mouth was, "Mom, I love you." And I said, "I know you do."
The narrative that Jimmy provides is that the two of them are basically home for a good part of the evening, and they're sort of getting along great. And that then she goes to bed, he stays up and watches some TV.
We knew from Jimmy, her fiance, Stacy Stites left her home at approximately 3 a.m. like she always did to go to a 3:30 a.m. shift at the H-E-B to work in produce. She drove Jimmy's truck, as she often did. Her normal route to work was on Highway 21 through Bastrop.
Andrew Cardenas is a co-worker of hers, and he's there in the parking lot waiting for Stacy to arrive. Stacy never does. And Stacy's not one to be late for work. And that's the first inkling that something is wrong.
They found a red truck in Bastrop by the high school. At about 5:23 that morning, a patrol officer had come across it. He didn't know that it had any relevance to anything. He called it into dispatch just because it was at the high school. It didn't register as stolen.
He was advised that the truck was owned by Fennell. He basically was able to look inside the truck. It was securely locked. The ignition was intact. There was nothing overtly wrong that he knew about. And so he just went on his way and continued his patrol.
Then as darkness shifts to daybreak, that innocent truck becomes a little more suspicious.
Roughly an hour later, around about 6:45 in the morning, Carol Stites gets a phone call from the grocery store wondering where Stacy is. She hasn't shown up.
Stacy was always on time.
Did you suspect something was wrong immediately?
No, I thought maybe his truck broke down or something. I immediately turned around and called Jimmy. I said, "Jimmy, Stacy didn't make it to H-E-B's." And he says, "Okay, I'll be down in just a minute."
He's getting dressed. He's tucking in his shirt. She notices that it looks like he just woke up. She grabbed the keys. She handed them to Jimmy so that he could go look for Stacy.
My name is David Board. I worked as a detective for the Bastrop Police Department at the time of Stacy Stites' disappearance. I received a call of a missing person. Stacy Stites had left Giddings, Texas, and was en route to work at H-E-B in Bastrop and never made it.
When the call comes in that Stacy's didn't make it to work, then dispatch and the patrol officer had sort of a uh-oh moment, and they went back.
Her pickup truck was at the Bastrop High School. So I responded there. I remember there was a belt. A part of a leather belt was located outside the truck.
Now we've got a missing person, and we've got the car that she was supposedly driving that morning. So we're going to put these together. They impound the truck.
Once Jimmy Fennell, Stacy's fiancé, unlocks that truck for investigators, they ask him to take a look and point out anything that seems unusual.
Detective Ed Sommel of the Bastrop Police Department stated that Jimmy pointed out a piece of green-colored plastic. Jimmy stated that it was part of a glass that Stacy drank out of, and that it was not in the truck broken like that before. Jimmy then pointed out one of the tennis shoes that was lying on the passenger floorboard. Jimmy pointed out that one of Stacy's earrings was on the passenger side floorboard. There were body fluids in the floorboard of that truck. Didn't really know exactly what it was or what caused it, but it was unusual. There was evidence of a struggle at the truck. We suspect foul play.
The police chief questions Jimmy and says that he's visibly shaken and very concerned, but not in a state of panic. Then Jimmy identifies that belt found outside the truck as Stacy's, and that's when he breaks down. Then he goes home to be with Stacy's mom, Carol, to wait.
Since her truck was found, she was nowhere around. The Texas Ranger, Rocky Wardlow, was contacted. We went up in the helicopter searched all over Bastrop.
What's going through your mind, Crystal, all day?
Hoping that we could find her alive, but still have dread.
Stacy's body isn't discovered until about 3:30 that afternoon, alongside of a dirt road kind of out in the county. There was a fella who was out there for an appointment. He had stopped to pick his wife wildflowers because it was the spring in Texas, and then he found her body. It had to be devastating.
It was.
It was awful.
It was awful.
And then, as unbelievable as it may sound in this small town, just 2 weeks after Stacy's body is discovered, a second young woman is found dead in the woods.
The citizens of Bastrop were believing they may have a serial killer on the loose.
They found Stacy on the side of a road and a bunch of wildflowers.
It had to be devastating.
It was.
It was awful.
It was awful.
My memory of that is my mom just sitting in her chair, just, my baby, my baby, my baby, my baby.
We had a bridal shower just a couple of days before she died. And all the bridal stuff was still sitting on my dining room table.
How did you even process that? The pastor from the church is the one who told me, and my question to him was, how could God let this happen? Things happen. You know, this is the devil's world.
When the DPS crime lab arrives, this is an impressive vehicle that comes down this dirt road in the middle of a pine forest. Were photographers, serologists, physical evidence collection people. This was quite a unique crew to show up in this little sleepy county of Bastrop.
Stacy's body is kind of almost 10 to 12 feet off of the road in the high grass. She's laying on her back, and in between her legs, there's her name tag for the AGB. And she is missing a shoe from the foot that we found the shoe in the truck. That seems to be the shoe she's missing. The interesting thing about that is her sock that's revealed underneath is completely clean, so it doesn't look like Stacy walked to this location. It looks like she was carried to this location and placed, meaning dumping the body.
The way she was clothed, what she'd been doing, how her zipper was broken from being pulled apart, about all of the things that told us this was a classic rape case.
There was what appeared to be the mate of that black woven belt that was found in the high school parking lot, laying on the side of the road. So this scene is now tying to the high school parking lot.
It was a braided leather belt that had been busted. It would appear to me that it was leather, and that for it to break, it would have had to have a tremendous amount of force pulling on it. It was enough force on that belt around Stacy Stites' neck to kill her. Stacy Stites was strangled to death.
The only prints that they were able to lift from the inside of the truck that were readable prints were Stacy's and Jimmy's. And yet, since that was his truck, his fingerprint being in that truck is not evidence of him perpetrating the crime.
Jimmy Fennell was absolutely considered as a suspect. Anytime a woman is murdered, the significant other is and should be one of the prime suspects.
Around the time of Stacy's death, another woman by the name of Mary Ann Alt was also found dead. A man named David Lawhon had confessed to her killing, and there was some talk that he might have been responsible for Stacy's death.
We knew about that case, and I know that it was definitely a consideration that there might have been a serial murderer up there.
There are some similarities between the Stacy Stites case and the Mary Ann case. Mary Ann Alt is a little bit older than Stacy Stites, but in both a truck is used, and in both the body is dumped, and in both a earring is an important piece of evidence.
David Lawhon had bragged about killing Stacy, and so David Lawhon became a suspect in Stacy Stites' murder. However, David Lawhon was excluded pretty quickly because the DNA from Stacy's murder did not match.
David Lawhon is convicted of that second murder, but still no arrests in Stacy's case, and her devastated family is mourning her loss. Stacy's funeral was there in Bastrop. It was standing room only.
The police set up a camera, a secret camera, to provide surveillance of the ceremony that's taking place. They're trying to surreptitiously capture people's emotions, people's reactions.
I remember walking around and thinking, did the person that killed Stacy, did they come to her funeral?
There are very few murders in Bastrop, a sleepy little southeast Texas town. And this one to be a young girl who went to high school, played sports, was active in her church. This would be the last person most people would believe would be involved in a crime.
There are 32 HEB employees from Austin helping out at this Bastrop store. A small favor, they feel, for fellow workers trying to cope with a traumatic experience.
Very sad for what happened.
Almost all of the more than 100 workers from this store are attending the memorial service for Stacy Stites.
At the church, at the funeral, the police place 2 camcorders in strategic locations. The camcorder that is placed in a box with a hole cut in the box. It's placed like that so that you can't tell that it's a video recording device. 4 days after this crime, they don't have any direct leads on anybody, and so they're looking for anything that seems out of the ordinary, anything that looks like it might point to a suspect.
We were supposed to be getting together for a wedding in a few weeks. Instead of going to Stacy's wedding, now we're going to Stacy's memorial.
It was devastating to all of us, including Jimmy. He was definitely a man who had just lost his fiancée.
Jimmy went over to the coffin and he had the wedding ring in his hand and he put the wedding ring on her finger. Goodbye. Yeah, told her goodbye. It was devastating. And she's buried with that wedding ring and she's buried in her wedding dress. And she worked hard for that wedding dress, and we all decided that that's what she should be buried in.
There was a graveside service, and what seemed unusual to me at that service was just that Jimmy, her fiance, really didn't show a lot of emotion at all. Of course, everybody grieves in their own way. Now today, Stacy's mother and sisters say they have always believed that Jimmy was innocent. But at the time, Stacy's sister Crystal was so concerned about Jimmy's behavior that she hired a private investigator and even made a list of his questionable behavior.
You kind of want to suspect the people nearest to her, and then you try to figure it out in your head. What happened and how did it happen? But once we knew that she had been raped, our emotions were like, it had to be somebody else.
We did not believe that Jimmy had hurt Stacy at all.
In fact, Jimmy himself even later talked about the pain he was feeling over Stacy's death.
It's going to be with me forever. I'll think about it. It'll be there. There's no way it's going to go away.
So Karen Blakely was the lead DNA analyst who processed the crime scene. She makes a telephone call to Rocky Wardlow, the lead investigator on the case. Karen Blakely told him the semen was deposited at the same time as the death. Essentially, she told him the rape happened at the same time Stacy died. It meant that Rocky Wardlow had the smoking gun. It meant that all he needed to do was to find the depositor of the semen. He is simply looking for a DNA match.
Investigators obtained reference samples from 28 men who had some part in Stacy Stites' life. Acquaintances, friends, co-workers.
Not one of them is a match, not even her fiancé, Jimmy Fennell, so the police were wondering, is there some other explanation? What if Stacy had been cheating? Could that be a motive for Jimmy Fennell to kill her?
It's hard having the finger pointed at you. It's hard for them saying that, yeah, you killed Stacy, your fiancé, that you did it because of these reasons, you know. But, I kept in my mind that I didn't do it.
Bastrop County Sheriff's Office.
There's a recorded phone conversation in which a woman calls in anonymously and claims her son was having an affair with Stacy.
I think Stacy was having a lay eye. Okay, I'm almost positive of it.
I mean, we've all kind of assumed that.
Who has a motive for this?
Well, at this point, the boyfriend does.
That's right.
That's a prime suspect. The person that we're trying to find is the liaison. For the longest time, we've had our suspicions. Okay?
The woman refuses to provide her son's name, although subsequently he was identified and he was ruled out.
And as the call continues, you can hear the investigators' frustration. It's been 4 months, and this investigation is going nowhere.
See, at this point, we're stymied. We've hit a brick wall. I have to look at Stacy's mom at least once a week, every day in the face, and it makes me not want to answer the phone because I know it's her, and I know she wants me to tell her something, and I have nothing to tell her.
We can see that Rocky Wardlow continues to look at Jimmy Fennell through 1996 as his investigation continues to go on. We can see that because he gives him a polygraph test.
One of the questions asked Jimmy was, did you strangle Stacy? Jimmy answered he did not. Another question asked Jimmy was, were you involved in the death of Stacy Stites? Jimmy Fennell stated again he was not. The examiner determined that Jimmy was deceptive in these two answers. Jimmy, in defense of himself, said that he was emotional, that all he could visualize in his mind was her lying deceased in the casket.
So it didn't concern you at all that he seemed to be deceptive on the polygraph test?
No. Nah, I think we would talk about it and think that he was just upset.
I think he felt bad that he didn't get up and take her to work that day. And then you feel like if I had been there, this wouldn't have happened.
Right.
What was it that led them to eliminate Jimmy Fennell?
Because of the logistic problems. Jimmy's truck was found in Bastrop, and he was home in Gidding, which is some 30 miles away. And so that was the problem, is that law enforcement could never make it make any sense that Jimmy had any involvement in this because they couldn't figure out how he ever could have gotten back home.
Unless he had a friend who might have given him a ride.
The investigators, the Texas Rangers, explored the possibility that somehow maybe someone had helped him and they could never find anything or anybody that credibly could have helped him. They looked at the mileage on the different patrol vehicles there at Giddings PD where he worked to see if there was any of those that were off, and there weren't. They looked at whether there were bus fares for people that night, and there weren't any. They looked at cab fares to see if there was some way he could have taken a cab.
Jimmy Fennell himself has always insisted that he is innocent.
They thoroughly vetted all the evidence they had, and they cleared him.
It was only after they matched the DNA to somebody that they dropped Jimmy as a suspect.
Another woman is violently attacked, and this woman lives. And her case is about to change everything.
I'm one of the investigators on the Stacy Stites murder. Do you even know who she is?
Stacy's murder goes unsolved for nearly a year. The cops are ostensibly looking at Jimmy and maybe in a couple other directions, but nothing's really happening.
1996 was an election year. Richard Hernandez won the position of the Bastrop County Sheriff. Hernandez announced that he would solve the murder of Stacy Stites within 6 months of taking office.
Richard Hernandez seizes on the Stites case, and this investigation begins to speed up. Wardlow is looking for a DNA match. That's the smoking gun.
Linda Schluter was another woman who was about 19 who had been abducted and beaten.
Linda Schluter was at this payphone in Bastrop, and there's a man who's kind of bothering her.
And he picked up the payphone next to the payphone I was on. He proceeded to ask me if he could get a ride. And he said, "I'm going to freeze to death." I felt bad. So I said, "Fine, I'll give you a ride." Once we took a ride on Main Street, he started to get out, and he got back in really quick, and he said, "Don't I get a hug?" And the next thing I know, he grabs me by the back of my hair with his left hand, and proceeds to slam my face into my steering wheel.
There's an incredible fight happening in the car. She basically gets away, and this guy takes her car and drives and then sort of crash abandons it somewhere down the road.
Deputies arrived, took her into Bastrop. They photographed her injuries. They took a statement.
I described the man that I gave a ride to. The police automatically knew who he was. They presented 6 African Americans on a piece of paper. This is the one who attacked me. The police told me that his name was Rodney Reed.
Mr. Reed was arrested, and later he was released without posting a bond. He was just released.
The way in which Linda Schluter was attacked really lent itself to the police narrative of how Stacey Stites was attacked.
Rodney Reed surfaced as a suspect wholly and exclusively because he tried to abduct Linda 6 months after Stacey's murder, and a detective told the ranger about the case, and the ranger said, "Oh my God, that sounds like the Stites case."
Rocky Wardlow, the lead investigator from the Texas Rangers, he's wondering, do we have Rodney Reed's DNA on file? And it turns out they did have a sample of Rodney Reed's DNA in the system.
Because he had been involved with a woman in 1995 in some sort of a relationship.
And she alleged that Rodney Reed had sexually assaulted her in her apartment. I responded and conducted a crime scene investigation.
She ultimately declines to pursue charges against Reed, and that case is kind of dropped, but the police retain this biological evidence.
Texas Ranger Rocky Wardlow, he requested that the serologist take the DNA off a washcloth and various other items collected in October 1995 and compare it to the DNA collected off Stacey Stites' body.
It was a match. They found that Rodney Reed's DNA is identical to the DNA evidence recovered from Stacey's body.
My name is Sandra Reed, and I am Rodney Reed's mother. Richard Hernandez, the sheriff, and the city police came to the house, and I knew Richard before he even became sheriff, and they were looking for Rodney. Rodney was not there. So I said, Richard, what is this for? Well, me, I'm thinking it's drugs. Well, look, Richard, I said, now, people know Rodney don't sell. He's not a drug dealer. He said, I know, Sandra. He said, but that's what they got. So, sure enough, Rodney came home. And I said, well, buddy, and get you some warm clothes, because I'm taking you to jail.
So they basically get Rodney into the police station on a drug-related charge. But it all seems pretty much kind of a ruse in order to ask him about Stacey.
I don't sell no drugs. So what are we talking about?
Well, let me read you your rights and stuff first, Rodney, and then we'll get off into that.
So what we're talking about is different than with...
Yeah, that drug case, I just want to kind of push it off to the sides. Of course, you know that I'm one of the investigators on the Stacey Stites murder. You're one of the many, many people that we have talked to regarding this case. Talking about you was really nothing unusual. What I want to know from you is if you know this girl. And if you do, when did you meet her? Have you ever met her? Or do you even know who she is?
No, I do not. I don't know what Stacey Stites. I've seen that stuff on the news and stuff like that, but I don't know that person.
Never dated her?
No, I haven't.
What I would like to get from you, if you don't mind, is a written statement stating that I don't know the Stacey Stites. Do you have a problem with that?
No, I don't.
And along with the statement, what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is to get a sample of your blood. Get some saliva samples and some hair samples, so that we can compare that with some of the stuff that we already have.
I don't mind doing things, but I'd like to have a lawyer and attorney, to back me up on what I'm doing,
Well, I understand. That's perfectly all right.
Okay. So, David.
Yeah.
All this here, this stuff here, am I being charged with something?
We'll visit with you later. By the time the questioning is over, Rodney is charged with the murder of Stacy Stites.
He stated that he was afraid. He was aware that Stacy was dead, and he was a black male having sex with a white girl in Bastrop.
Stacy Stites was white. Rodney Reed was black. Rodney lived in Texas long enough to know what that meant.
Free Rodney Reed now! Free Rodney
This case is about to draw attention to the small town of Bastrop.
He has some high-profile names coming to his defense now.
And spark what many believe will be a long road to justice. You're sitting here with me and the clock is ticking.
To put them to death for something that they know that they did not do. I got to fight to save my son's life.
How do you tell your daughter, if you died today, I can never be more proud of you?
We know for sure, 100% positive, that Rodney Reed murdered my sister. We did not believe that Jimmy, her fiance, had hurt Stacy at all.
They cleared him.
An insurance lady provided an affidavit saying that Jimmy Fennell says, if you ever cheat on me, I will kill you and no one will ever know about it.
What did the state completely get wrong as far as you're concerned about her death?
Everything.
Morning investigators charged 29-year-old Rodney Reed of Bastrop with attempted murder in connection with the death of Stacy Stites.
When it came out that the person arrested for Stacy's death was tied to DNA, the citizens of Bastrop County would believe that they actually caught the killer. Rodney Reed was charged with sexual assault, kidnapping, and murder of Stacy Stites. With those two enhancements of a kidnap and a rape, where it resulted in a death, it became a death penalty case.
Rodney Reed, around that time frame, he was in his late 20s. He was fairly well known around town. In April of '96, he is doing some work at a super wrestling in Bastrop.
Rodney's achievements in sports were phenomenal. He really excelled in boxing. He was a contender in the Golden Gloves. But Rodney Reed also was a free spirit. He had some run-ins with the law. He wasn't a choir boy.
He had told me, Mom, I'm dating a girl and she's engaged to a cop. And I had warned him, Rodney, you have too many irons in the fire, and you're going to get burned.
He said that they had a relationship, a consensual relationship.
There's never been any evidence whatsoever that there was any type of relationship. There's no notes, there's no letters, no phone records.
My son was arrested for the murder of Stacy Stites. I knew it was a lie instantly. I'm hurt to the core. And at the same time, I got to fight these people to save my son's life. I found a lawyer by the name of Jimmy Brown. He was a good lawyer.
I went out to meet Rodney. I knew that he initially denied knowing Stacy, and I asked him about that. Rodney stated that he and Stacy were having sex. Stacy would pick him up at various locations, one being the HEB parking lot. It wasn't boyfriend, girlfriend, it was purely sexual. He was aware that she was dead and that he was a black male having sex with a white girl in Bastrop. He stated, quite honestly, that he was afraid. I did tell the family, you're going to need resources to get experts.
Rodney Reed's family is not wealthy, and they're going to need at least $50,000 to retain an attorney. And very shortly, it becomes very obvious that the Reed family is not going to be able to raise the money.
At that time, in January of 1998, the court appointed Calvin Garvey and Lydia Clay Jackson to represent Rodney Reed.
The state had almost 2 years to
investigate the case. We only had 2 months to prepare. We had numerous motions for continuance. The ruling was generally, I'll give you more funds, but never any more time.
The trial of the state of Texas versus Rodney Rodell Reed. It started May 4th, 1998. This is arguably the largest case that Bastrop had ever seen.
Now, this trial has been front-page news here in Bastrop, and a lot of the townspeople we discovered have already formed their own conclusions.
At that time, a capital murder case in a small town like Bastrop was unusual. There was also the racial component to it. An African-American defendant, a white victim, and that raised the tension around that case in Bastrop.
I have 6 sons. Rodney is my 4th son. I have faith in God. This was too wrong. I have a God, and I'm believing in him, and I will hold on to my faith with God that he will bring my son home.
I turned it over to God because it all works out in the end, and God's still in control. She had hopes and dreams, and he took that all away.
In the opening statements, the prosecution made it clear that the DNA was really the heart of their case. The prosecution called the DNA Cinderella's slipper, and it only fits one person.
This DNA that was found inside of Stacey Stites that matches Rodney Reed.
The defense told the jury that they were going to provide evidence that Rodney Reed and Stacey Stites had a relationship, and that would explain the DNA.
In front of an all-white jury, prosecutor Lisa Tanner began her opening arguments and laid out the narrative that the prosecution would go with the entire trial.
That morning, Stacey Stites got up at 3 or so. She left her apartment to go to a 3:30 a.m. shift at the HEB. Her normal route to work was on Highway 21 through Bastrop, where she would go through the railroad tracks going into Bastrop. And Rodney Reed either jumped in her truck or talked his way into her truck, much like what he did with Linda. We believe from there that Rodney Reed raped her and strangled her. And dumped her body on the road and then put her truck less than 0.6 of a mile from his home and walked home.
Jimmy Fennell testified in the trial. He gave the timetable and the timeline of where they were, how much he loved his fiancée, and that he didn't kill her.
The state's key witnesses were Megan Clement and Dr. Bayardo. These individuals painted a damning picture for Mr. Reed. Dr. Bayardo took the stand and he opined on Stacey's time of death. And this time of death that he put was 3:30 in the morning.
And this was devastating to Rodney's team because it put Stacey in Bastrop at the time of her death. It set the foundation for the fatal blow to be delivered. Their most powerful witness in the name of Megan Clements.
Megan Clement was a serologist who tested vaginal samples from Stacey, and she connected them with the DNA with Rodney Reed.
What I was really waiting for was the testimony about this affair that they contended was happening between Rodney and Stacey.
They had one witness who said someone matching Stacey's description came to Reed's house, but she got Stacey's name wrong.
Other witnesses that we talked with, in large part, feared there would be retribution should they testify on Rodney's behalf. I knew we were in trouble.
Prosecutors are about to deal a devastating blow as they pile on evidence that will cripple Reed's case and his overwhelmed defense team.
It is a free-for-all. Rodney's defense attorneys were scrambling to try to get their ducks in a row.
The trial really seemed like the prosecution show. They had their DNA evidence. They brought out their specialists. The linchpin of the whole case for them was they had Rodney Reed's DNA inside Stacey Stites.
The big weakness of the defense's case was after they told the jury they were going to show evidence of this affair, they weren't able to produce witnesses to testify about it.
When the prosecution came over to the jury and said, the secret affair between Rodney Reed and Stacy Stites was so secret that Stacy didn't even know it existed. I think that really sold the jury.
After less than a day of deliberating, all of the 12 jurors came back unanimously, and they decided that Rodney Reed was guilty of the capital murder of Stacy Stites.
It was not an easy decision. It was very hard. There was a lot of pressure. We considered all the facts, and I believe that justice was done.
The 12 white, this is something that you expect. Just like I said before, I had built myself up already for this verdict that they were going to give.
Since the jurors had found Rodney Reed guilty, now they have to determine what his punishment is for the crime of capital murder. And there's essentially a second trial. This second trial is to determine whether or not he is to be sentenced to death or spend his life in prison.
During the punishment phase, the prosecution can bring up anything about your background, prior bad acts, accusations, things that haven't even been proved in court, to try to convince the jury that you deserve death.
The lawyers for the state bring in unadjudicated rape allegations that they say Rodney committed, but was never charged with until after he is going on trial for Stacy's murder.
But the defense said they didn't have time to investigate the claims of any of these witnesses.
Among the witnesses who testified was Vivian Harbottle, who was raped 6 months before Stacy's murder in October of 1995 along the railroad tracks in the area.
It was dark and I'd been drinking, and when the police wanted to show me a lineup, I said no because I couldn't identify this person and I didn't want to pick the wrong person. I think it was like 6 months to a year until they called me in to say that they had matched the DNA to Rodney Reed. I had no idea who Rodney Reed was.
One of the other witnesses at the punishment phase was a young woman by the name of Angela Hamby.
Angela Hamby was a 12-year-old girl that lived in Bastrop. Sometime in 89, in the first week of September 89, she was raped.
That case was unsolved for years until the advancement of DNA, and the DNA that was collected from Angela Hamby was cross-referenced with Rodney Reed's DNA, and it was a match.
You also have the Linda Schluter case where the states decided that all these additional cases were committed by Rodney to bolster the notion that he had murdered and raped Stites.
When you have witness after witness after witness coming and saying, the man who's seated next to you did these terrible things, taking a toll out of your client who's told you that no, he did not do that.
Convicted murderer Rodney Reed is on death row in Huntsville. A judge formally sentenced him today for the murder of 19-year-old Stacy Stites.
It's devastating news for one family.
They got the capital murder out of the deal, and that's what they wanted.
That's true too.
News of justice and relief for another.
I'm really glad that justice was served and that the system really does work.
When he was sentenced to death, Deborah, did you have any doubt about whether this was the right person?
We haven't had any doubt at all. No. We know for sure that 100% positive that Rodney Reed murdered my sister.
I knew my son had been railroaded. For someone to put them to death for something that they know that they did not do.
Once a defendant is sentenced to death in a capital murder case, the state will pay for all of his appeals up to his exoneration or execution.
If you look at the entire universe of what has come up as evidence since Rodney's been convicted, you get a very disturbing picture.
While Reed is appealing his death sentence, some startling claims emerge from a Texas Rangers investigation into Stacy Stites' former fiancé, Officer Jimmy Fennell.
I got raped by a cop. I need you to call. Are you there with him?
Rodney Reed has spent all this time on death row fighting for his life. But what's going on with Jimmy Fennell? Well, he's moved on to another police department up in Georgetown. It's north of Austin.
In 2007, about 10 years after Stacy Stites' murder, it appears that her former fiancé, Officer Jimmy Fennell, is under investigation by the Texas Rangers after a pretty disturbing incident.
My name is Connie Lear, and Jimmy Fennell was the police officer who had taken me and raped me.
October of 2007, Connie Lear is with her boyfriend at an apartment complex. So they've been drinking. They get into sort of disagreement. There were some neighbors, and they call the cops.
The cops showed up, one being Jimmy Fennell, Jr., and separated us so that they could figure out what was going on.
The police end up arresting her boyfriend. According to police reports, Sergeant Fennell ends up telling one of the other officers that he was going to try and get intelligence from her.
The only one that was still there was Fennell. We were alone. And that's when I was asking, please take me to my boyfriend. So he took me over to the patrol car, and he put me in the front seat. So we started driving. I started to realize that something was wrong when we pulled into a secluded park. And he came around to my side and told me to get out. And so I got out, and he took out his weapon, and he laid it in front of me. And then he slammed me up against the back of his patrol car. And then he jerked my pants down. And he raped me. And I didn't fight back because I was scared. And when he was done, he put me back in the patrol car, drove me back to the apartment complex, and he handed me a business card and told me that we were going to do it again the next day.
Connie ends up going to one of her neighbors and calls 911.
911, what's the address for the emergency? Oh, God. Okay, what agency was the cop with? Was it Georgetown or... Where's Williamson County, Georgetown, Texas? I don't want to go back here. Okay, we're going to send somebody out to help you, okay? Why will you drive me off? It's going to be a different officer to come talk to you. I want ambulance and a red kid. Stay on the phone with me. Okay, I'm on the phone with you. I'm not going to hang up, okay?
Only a couple of minutes went by, and I noticed spotlights. I saw the patrol cars pulling in with no ambulance. And the closer they got, I realized that the first police officer in line was Jimmy Fennell.
Okay, Connie. He's not out of this car. Now, Connie, listen to me. I have his car scrunched over my head. Now, this is the same cop. Okay, do you see the ambulance? Okay, Connie, is there a female officer there with you? There's a female Africa around the corner where Jimmy Fennell is. Jimmy Fennell.
And according to what one of the other officers wrote in his report, Sergeant Fennell tells an officer she's claiming that I raped her.
Connie says she was then placed in a police car and then forced to take back her claim that Fennell raped her.
And I looked into the patrol camera, and I said I made the whole incident up. And after I was done, he said, okay, well, you're under arrest for public intoxication. Put your hands behind your back.
After Lear was taken to the Williamson County Jail, she called 911, and she got the attention of the sheriff's office and the Texas Rangers. A criminal investigation was opened that same day. Connie Lear was released from jail and taken to a hospital for treatment. The charge against her was dropped.
A few days later, formal charges were filed against Jimmy Fennell.
Jimmy Fennell Jr. now faces charges of sexual assault, kidnapping, improper sexual activity with a person in custody, and official oppression.
If he got convicted on all of those charges, Jimmy would face more than 99 years in prison. Instead, he pleaded guilty to one count of improper sexual relations with a person in custody and one count of kidnapping. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
I mean,
the mugshots of Jimmy Fennell make him look like a monster, but up close and personal, just a likable country boy. In no way am I denying that he committed a crime, because there was misconduct that he admitted and took responsibility for.
The DA never talked to me about plea agreements. That wasn't their choice to be made, that was mine.
After Jimmy Fennell goes to prison, it's discovered that he was the subject of several internal affairs investigations that involved allegations of sexual assault and misconduct.
According to police reports, he had this pattern of targeting certain women, and it seemed like he was really targeting women who were vulnerable, and he would use those as leverage to get them to do sexual acts with him.
Jimmy Fennell's defense attorney, Robert Phillips, told ABC News that authorities apparently thought so little of these extraneous offenses that none of them were ever prosecuted, nor did these women ever testify in court.
In Jimmy Fennell's case, he found the Lord after 10 years of hard time in a Texas prison, and he's trying to put the pieces together to create a new world for himself. Jimmy was never going to be police officer of the decade.
This is a person that is supposed to protect you. There's no 10-year sentence that frees me of the things that he did to me.
While Jimmy Fennell has done his time and is out on a new path as a free man, Rodney Reed is still on death row.
Rodney Reed's death sentence is not the end of the story. It's actually the start of a new chapter when attorneys from the Innocence Project step in to unearth a new witness.
She told me she was sleeping with a black guy, and I remember being completely shocked. She and I both, proceeded to say, wow, you need to be careful with this.
Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you more. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you, Lord. I want to see you. I want to see you. See you high and lifted up to see you.
Well, I think it's pretty hard for an African-American man to be accused of raping and murdering a white woman in the state of Texas, be found guilty, and not receive the death penalty.
We have an expression among our colleagues in the innocence movement. It doesn't take a village, it takes an army. How could you not be affected by a person on death row that you think the evidence shows by clear and convincing proof is innocent?
What I spend my time doing is calling individuals who may have information from that time back in 1996 who are willing to come forward. It's an enormous challenge. We are in a position now where 24 years later we're having to go out and try to speak to people and ask them about things they might have seen a quarter of a century ago. What I see when I am in Bastrop is a community that has progressed from that time back in 1996. I think the idea of an interracial relationship was something that was frowned upon in that community. I think that's changed. You might recall that the jury was not convinced that there was a relationship. This was a very damaging, even devastating part of his trial. Alicia Slater is a witness who worked at the HEB with Stacy, who has come forward talking about the relationship that existed between Rodney Reed and Stacy Stites.
In 1995, Stacy and I worked together at HEB. She told me that she wasn't that excited to get married because she was sleeping with a black guy named Rodney. To hear that she was actually having an affair was shocking to begin with. She and I both, proceeded to say, wow, you need to be careful with this. Being an 18-year-old about ready to graduate high school, I didn't want to get involved.
In a 2016 filing, the state contends that her account is patently unbelievable and that she'd failed to mention the secret affair when she spoke to police at the time of the murder. If Rodney Reed did have a relationship with Stacy Stites, doesn't that complicate your case?
Well, sure. However, it's awfully hard to find this evidence credible that he miraculously
has this secret affair with this girl, and somehow his semen hangs around for several days.
Which science says it can do.
There are exceptions. There are no absolutes in science. That's why you look at all of the extraneous evidence as well in conjunction with just the DNA.
When you look at the actual police reports of the investigation, there was a lot of mistakes early on. One of the key mistakes from the first day, it is Murder Investigation 101 that you go to where the last person saw that victim.
Why wouldn't they search Jimmy's apartment?
I wish law enforcement would have searched the apartment. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that, it was okay. I mean, but I will tell you this. I've been doing this a long time, and never once have I ever had a case where I didn't at some point say, gosh, I wish law enforcement would have done whatever it is, X.
They were looking at Jimmy, but yet they turned his trunk back over to him within a week
after they had fully processed it.
But if they're looking at him as a suspect, why would they turn his truck back over to him?
Well, why wouldn't they? Forensically speaking, they did everything that was available to examine the truck forensically at the time. And so it wouldn't have made any sense for them to keep it. He needed wheels.
One of the challenges that I've had specifically working on this case is getting witnesses to come forward. The problem has been they're fearful. But we have 9 new witnesses in this most recent appeal. One of those witnesses is an insurance lady. She's trying to encourage Stacy Stites to purchase some insurance on her life. And Stacy sort of laughs and says, gosh, I'm so young. I have no need for insurance. And this insurance lady provided an affidavit saying that at that moment, before she can say anything more, Jimmy Fennell then says, if you ever cheat on me, I will kill you and no one will ever know about it.
One of the witnesses who has come forward is a gentleman named Charles Wayne Fletcher, a former member of the Bastrop County Sheriff's Office.
In an affidavit, Fletcher recalls Jimmy Fennell saying, I believe she is sleeping with a black man. Keep in mind, the way that Mr. Fletcher tells the story, Jimmy Fennell used a racial slur, and he didn't say the word sleeping.
And every time a new person comes forward, it's more colorful and creative than the last. I keep waiting for Mother Teresa to be the next witness from beyond the grave. It's just nonsense. He's not guilty of murder. He didn't do it. And the evidence shows that.
In its response, the state argues that neither witness is believable because they waited so long to come forward. What did the state completely get wrong as far as you're concerned about her death?
Everything. They were like, oh my God, this is way off.
Rodney Reed has been on death row for more than 20 years. With just weeks to go before he was about to be executed, we traveled to Texas to hear his story. You're sitting here with me and the clock is ticking.
Yes.
You're set to be executed.
Bryce Benchett and this whole team of lawyers have been working on this case and struggling so hard for so many years.
So one day I get a call from Detective Sergeant Gannon, and he had been looking at this independently. And he says, I found something new, and you guys got to hear about it.
This homicide detective pointed out what he thought was obvious. That was a big deal.
Detective Gannon.
So Detective Sergeant Gannon.
Nice to see you. You're former NYPD.
Homicide, right?
Yeah. The state's case essentially was that she was intercepted on her way to work, that she was raped, and that she was strangled. What did the state completely get wrong as far as you're concerned about her death?
Everything. It was like, oh my God, this is way off.
What was way off?
Time of death was way off. It was hours earlier. I give a lot of credit to Kevin Gannon because he did point to the key scientific evidence that really showed that they were all wrong.
And then when we take this to the actual medical examiner who testified, he gives us a sworn statement that said nobody should have relied on what I said.
Here's what the medical examiner wrote. My estimate of time of death was only an estimate and should not have been used at trial as an accurate statement of when Miss Stites died.
It's one of the great things about the system. In a way, you can go back to court, not as easily as it should be. If you can get the proof, you should be able to get an exoneration.
Family and supporters of Rodney Reed gathered in the Bastrop County courtroom today. Rodney Reed's defense attorneys are trying to include forensic evidence from that 1996 murder that they say will prove his innocence.
Michael Baden, B-A-D-E-N.
Dr. Baden has weighed in on some of the biggest cases from O.J. Simpson to George Floyd. Reed's defense team brings him in to talk about the timing of Stacy's death using the science of lividity.
The lividity is because of the settling of the red blood cells in downward position. After about 4, 5, 6 hours, the lividity stays, and that's called fixed lividity. In this instance, there was fixed lividity in the front of her body.
On her back, as her body was discovered, that means that Stacy Stites was dead in a different position 4 or more hours prior to the time of that 3 to 5 a.m. window in order to get that way. All that shows that this homicide occurred hours before 3 a.m. at a time that she was just with Jimmy.
Now, you mentioned that there was other factors. Yes, there was another, which is called classic sign of death, rigor mortis, which you stiffening of the body.
After somebody dies, it begins to set in where the body stiffens and contracts. And that process begins and goes through a period of about 12 hours and then begins to slacken. We have videotape of the body of Stacy Stites being examined, manipulated, and put into a body bag. That video shows that she can be put into that body bag and her arms folded.
The rigor mortis was present but leaving the body. So this would put it about 20 hours, something like that, of death, where the rigor has come, stayed, and then started going away.
And that is very powerful scientific evidence that, again, the time of death is way before that 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. window of the prosecution's case.
If she's killed at midnight and not 3 a.m., then Rodney Reed is excluded as the killer. So according to the defense's legal filings, the perpetrator then becomes Jimmy Fennell because he said he was in the apartment with her that night.
No, not based on any of the credible evidence or physical evidence or forensic evidence. It's a concoction of creative, brilliant lawyers trying to save a condemned man.
And the state argues that none of these methods establishing the time of death are totally reliable or have pinpoint accuracy, and Dr. Baden agrees.
I agree with that, yes. I conclude the hearing.
We gonna win, Rodney. Love you, baby.
The judge says the new evidence is not compelling enough for a retrial.
The judge said he rejected Baden's testimony because it would not necessarily have changed the opinion of the jury, and that other evidence of Reed's guilt was strong. The court went on to say that Dr. Baden never examined the body and that he based his opinion on crime scene reports, videos, and photos.
In the meantime, another court has set an execution date for Rodney Reed.
A state judge granted prosecutors' request to set Reed's execution for November 20th.
At this point, there is outrage all over the country about this execution. The national media has gotten involved. And in the middle of this outcry, I travel to Texas and sit down with Reed on death row. You're sitting here with me and the clock is ticking.
Yes.
You set to be executed?
I hope not, but yes. I am holding on. Not just for myself, but for my family.
The jury believed that you killed Stacy Stites. Did you rape Stacy Stites?
No, I didn't.
Did you kill Stacy
No,
Stites?
I absolutely did not.
How would you describe your relationship with her? Were you in love with her?
I couldn't say that I was in love with her. We were both in relationships. I was seeing someone else. She was seeing someone else.
So it was a casual, sexual relationship?
Yes, that's all. If I wouldn't have known her, if I wouldn't have been associated with her, I wouldn't be in this situation. But this is the situation that was handed to me. I have to accept that I'm here now for something that I didn't do.
Earlier this week, attorneys for Reed sent a new letter to the governor to ask for a delay in the execution.
What's on the line is pretty much everything.
We had unprecedented support from really all over the world.
Kim Kardashian West asked Rodney, is there anything that I can do to be helpful to this case.
Something's off here. Something needs to be done.
Free Rodney Reed! Free Rodney Reed! Free Rodney Reed! Free Rodney Reed! No! Free Rodney Reed! Free Rodney Reed!
They've held dozens of rallies and protests.
We had unprecedented support. I don't know if it's social media coverage or media coverage, but just the closer we got, the louder the noise.
A rally outside the Texas governor's mansion.
Something's off here. Something needs to be done.
Breaking news this afternoon, Rodney Reed will not be executed next week.
An indefinite stay of execution.
A victory for death row inmate Rodney Reed in the fight to clear his name.
The hearing coming up keeps on getting postponed because of COVID-19. The one thing I'm very confident about is that the more you look at it, and the more you look at the forensic pathology and the science, it's clear and convincing evidence of innocence.
Do I think Rodney Reed killed Stacey Stites? Yes. I do think that in our criminal justice system is not a perfect system. And that's one reason why I'm not a proponent of the death penalty. There is room for error.
I have no doubt about his guilt. I have tried and tried to figure out somehow that Rodney Reed didn't kill Stacey Stites. I can't get there. And I've also tried to figure out how Jimmy, her fiance, could have done it, and I also can't get there.
I have a son's life to save, and that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm going to do until I leave. I have to hold on to my faith and stand on this truth and the facts and thank the world. I thank the world for the support. I have so much support, and God knows I thank the whole world. But leave me alone with my pain.
And what do you say to people who say that this case may be a miscarriage of justice?
I find that people have not heard all of the evidence.
What upsets you most?
Trying to defend my sister.
And the lies told about her.
While Carol's daughter was a teen mom, she made a tough decision to give up her baby girl for adoption. Stacey Stites' child is now a 26-year-old mom of 2.
My oldest is Stacey Lee. She's named after Stacey. I wanted her legacy to live on. She has grandchildren that she never will get to meet.
The only reason I'm doing this right now is I think we really have a shot of getting this across that Stacey was human and all she wanted to do is get married and have a baby.
Police emergency.
It's an emergency. I've just walked in and found my mother's body lying there, untreated dead.
It was fairly obvious this was going to be a big story.
We've spent millions of pounds on this investigation, the most expensive investigations that Hampshire police have ever run.
That type of thing doesn't happen around here.
Why was this little old lady killed?
This is a murder.
Nestled beside the River Itchen sits the pretty hamlet of Brambridge.
Brambridge is typical of these tiny little hamlets that have got very, very few homes there. Everyone really knows everyone. It's a very friendly kind of place, and you've got your little store, and all community life is around those areas. It attracts a lot of visitors simply because of the River Itchen. There are lovely walks along the river. There, again, one of the most beautiful spots in England. Brambridge is most definitely one of the loveliest.
This picturesque part of Hampshire often attracts a slower pace of life.
It was always predominantly sort of an elder generation place, so people around here were sort of over 50s, 60s.
The community is an aged community. It's not an awful lot of very young people. There are some young people, of course, homes with kids and so on, but the majority of the community is older people.
The Hampshire Hogs, as they're known, they're very proud of their area. The local people who have been here for generations. And, yeah, like everywhere in village life, it's lovely.
At the very edge of Brambridge lived a wealthy 77-year-old grandmother, Georgina Edmonds.
Everything that was said about Georgina Edmonds was just a lovely, lovely lady. Well-liked and loved by everyone that knew her, very close to her family, very friendly, and just a charming old lady.
She had grandchildren that she really enjoyed playing with, was always up for a bit of a laugh. Her grandson was a budding filmmaker, and he would make funny little videos at Christmas, and Georgina would star in those as well. And she enjoyed life, you know, she was still very independent, she was still mobile, she drove her car, she would go down to the shops, but she had assistance with that as well.
Well, I knew her because one of the jobs I did at work was, to take the groceries to the dear old souls who couldn't get around. I know she always had her little dogs with her, rather sweet little things, very, very friendly. They used to stand up at the window and look out of the window. She was a delightful person, and nothing to say about her that wasn't nice.
Georgina lived in a large gated estate on the edge of the river.
The Edmonds family were well known in the area. It was Georgina's husband who had founded the family business importing coffee.
Very well-to-do family. Harry, her son, worked in London. The business, I believe, was in Basingstoke. But again, most of the time they were up in London working hard and would come back to Hampshire at weekends, for rest.
When Georgina's husband sadly passed away, she downsized into the smaller house on the estate.
She moved into the cottage, which is your chocolate box cover cottage itself.
Nice little house, amongst the trees, by the river.
Her son Harry took over running the business and moved into the larger house, as you would when you reach an older age. You don't want the bother of all the dusting.
Georgina seemed happy in her new home, but in January 2008, life in the community changes forever.
Police emergency.
It's an emergency. I've just come down to my house. My mother has a cottage 100 yards away.
Right.
I've got no reply from her. I've come in through her bedroom window, which was unlocked. She's lying on the floor in the kitchen, and it looks to me as if she's been hit over the head. She looks as if she's dead.
Okay, calm down for me, sir. What's your name?
My name is Harry Edmonds. I'm her son. I've just walked in. I came in through the window, and I found the house in complete darkness. I've gone through into the kitchen. Found my mother's body lying there, and I've been out walking her dog. This looks like a crime scene to me.
Okay, well try not to touch anything for me.
This is a murder.
Okay, just calm down for me, sir. I'll send someone else for you, okay?
Yeah, please, as soon as possible. I'm sick to death. That's a murder.
It was about 6:15. I was at home, just prepping dinner, and my phone rang, and so I answered the phone, and they said, we've got a suspicious death. I said, okay, tell me about that. And they said, it's an elderly woman been found dead in the kitchen, face down by her son. So I jumped in the car, and it was a miserable, wet, cold January night, blowing a gale. Driving through these country roads as we are now.
Paul Barton, Detective Chief Inspector at the time, arrives at Georgina's address, which is already swarmed with a significant police presence.
So just as I'm pulling down here, I could see the blue lights sort of flashing in the pitch black. So I know I'm getting close to it. And then I just come around the bend, and there's some more police activity. A police van and a police car, an ambulance, and some tape here, just across the bridge here. So I just pull in where I'm pulling in now, actually. I walked up the drive. It's a short walk up a gravel drive into the cottage. The kitchen door is on the side of the cottage. I just looked in. I could see, sadly, Georgina was lying there face down with a large amount of blood around her, some stab wounds to her neck. So I was satisfied at that point that we did have something that was a suspicious death.
A murder investigation is launched, and police maintain a secure perimeter in and around Georgina's home.
You only get one go at recovering evidence from a body, and one that is already compromised. There will be a lot of discussion about what should be sampled at the scene, what should be done at the scene, what is going to be compromised by another action.
So there will be a lot of effort going into preserving as much evidence as possible.
I actually want this road completely closed, and it's one in, one entrance out, but I didn't want anyone else coming across it, and I certainly didn't want the press turning up and having a look. And so immediately what we call a wider cordon was put on, and we blocked the road so that we had complete control of the area.
That morning, we went out for a walk, and as we crossed the road where it leads to her house, there was a policeman standing there. There was a car, the road was blocked. And I said, "Can you tell me what's happening on this road? There's been a murder."
When the news broke, it was fairly obvious from the beginning that this was going to be a big story. Neighbours would phone the newsroom and say, "Can you tell us anything about what's going on?"
Everybody was talking about it, wherever you went, and everybody in all the shops. And there were police everywhere, and you just wouldn't generally see police presence in that area.
The 15 years that we've been here, we haven't seen or we haven't heard of a murder, except for this one. This is the first one.
I think that was quite worrying, because, why? Why was this little old lady killed? What was the reason? So it just seemed very, very random and horrible.
It became very obvious very quickly that this was a murder hunt that was out of the ordinary, shall we say.
So what led to a murder in this peaceful village? And why would someone want to kill a well-loved member of the community?
Police emergency.
It's an emergency. I've just walked into the kitchen and found my mother's body lying there. This looks like a crime scene to me. This is a murder.
In the picturesque village of Brambridge, the close-knit community has woken up to the news that a much-loved 77-year-old grandmother, Georgina Edmonds, has been brutally murdered in her home.
It's extremely grim. My mum was 77 at the time and living with us, not very far away. So, you don't even want to think about it.
It's gone from being a quiet village scenario to then being sort of on the local news, everybody talking about it, what's happened, that type of thing doesn't happen around here.
With a small community in fear of a killer in their midst, it's down to DCI Paul Barton to address the public.
A Saturday morning I was doing my first media briefing, and it was packed, and it was Sky News Live, BBC Live, it was headline news, it was Midsummer Murders, kind of 77-year-old lady murdered brutally. So the nation were interested, and the media were interested.
Under a national media spotlight, Hampshire police are under pressure to work out who would kill Georgina Edmonds and why.
As just start sort of kicking into autopilot, the next thing I'm thinking is, well, who's done this? Who's responsible? Any suspicious incident calls in that area in the last 24 hours? Has the victim been a victim of any other crimes? Is there any sort of domestic violence within the household? What do we know about the rest of the family? What do we know about the neighbours?
Was this a stranger murder? Was this someone, though, that she knew? And in such a small village, how did they get in and out of the cottage without being seen?
With a killer on the loose, the finger of suspicion is on every member of the community.
Everybody asking questions. We had so many people come in the pub at the time. Did you hear anything? Did you see anything? Do you know who it was?
We go out as the media and knock on doors and try to talk to people, find people that would have known her. When you've only got 5 homes to actually knock on the door, the community, they'll be in shock themselves, actually, about it.
With Georgina's son Harry too distraught to speak, it was left to neighbours to speculate what had happened. Had someone targeted her because of her wealth?
They had a beautiful house, they had quite a bit of money in the family. I just remember that, the money, the big house, the jewellery. It was in a dark, secluded area.
There was nothing else there. There was another house, I think, to the right, I seem to remember. But that's it. She was on her own.
Police conduct a thorough search of Georgina's house for clues.
We were exploring what could have happened. Was it burglary that was the motive? Her credit card had been taken. I believe also a rattly handbag was gone. I think a laptop was gone. But there were other items that were there in the kitchen that were quite valuable. There was money, I believe, that were just left. And that seemed rather strange, that this was a burglary that had gone wrong, that the burglar hadn't taken those fairly obvious items that were there.
Police take a closer look at the crime scene, and one significant thing jumps out. There's no sign of a forced entry.
Was this a cover-up? Was it another motive? And so therefore, had she been targeted in some other way? And it was a pretend burglary, taking just a few things, when a real burglar would have taken lots of things.
With no sign of a break-in, everyone known to Georgina is under suspicion. Could the local community offer clues as to who Georgina may have let into the house?
Trusting, you couldn't have had anyone more trusting. She was that sort of person. She never disputed things, she just trusted people. And sometimes people are a bit suspicious, but she wasn't that type of person.
She was the sort of person, and I guess this is of her age, that would keep her door unlocked. She would talk to strangers. If someone knocked on the door and asked for directions, she wouldn't be suspicious. Probably even offer them a cup of tea and, spend time with people.
With no obvious break-in, detectives are left to speculate whether this was a random attack by a stranger or by someone closer to home.
Quite often the last person to see the person alive could be the killer. It is odd that a son comes home and finds their mum dead in a kitchen. I dealt with other jobs where children have killed parents. They may have been off their face on drink or drugs. There may have been a domestic argument that's then gone too far. He could have had an axe to grind with his mother, and he could have killed his mother, and then he's just made up that he's come in and found her dead.
Police reanalyse the 999 call made by Georgina's son, Harry.
I've just walked in and found my mother's body lying there. This looks like a crime scene to me. This is a murder.
It's a strange call, I have to say. He's very calm, but he says she's dead. I think it's a murder, he says. And I remember, we played that time and time again, and it's gone out in the media as well. And, a lot of people thought that was strange.
Police bring Harry in for questioning to establish his movements in the hours his mother was murdered. He tells detectives he was at work all day and did not return home till 6 p.m.
He was concerned because he hadn't heard from his mother all day, and I think he'd been trying to call her. And he went to the cottage and it was in darkness. Harry's managed to force open the ground floor window, I think into Georgina's bedroom. He climbs in, goes into the kitchen and finds Georgina lifeless on the floor in a pool of blood.
Harry's story is quickly verified. Police are still no closer to establishing who had gained access to Georgina's home. So they release CCTV footage of Georgina the day before her death, which shows her holding a handbag, which is now missing, and urge the public for help.
To be honest, most people were pretty appalled anyway. Just the fact that an old lady had been murdered without knowing the detail. And generally, everyone was trying to be as helpful as they possibly could.
It was a huge community thing, and they had big things in the village hall. So everyone got together, they all went out searching. Everybody was sort of part of it. Everybody searched, everyone went and looked, and all together really as a community.
Despite the community's best efforts, Georgina's handbag isn't found. But post-mortem results help police identify the cause of death. Could this lead to clues as to her attacker?
On one level, the death of Georgina Edmonds pathologically is straightforward. She has been struck on the head with a heavy blunt object. Ultimately, it was identified that that was a marble rolling pin. A heavy weapon, a good sort of thing to use to cause damage. But on top of that, you then have the incised wounds, the cuts to the body, inflicted with a degree of deliberation, and you don't really have defensive type injuries. One conclusion that could reasonably be drawn is that if they're not in a place where they're likely to kill you, that they are an act of torture. There is an attempt to distress somebody and extract information.
Police now believe Georgina was tortured before she died.
It was horrific, terrible. And as more details came out about what the guy had done to her, apparently tortured her, it got worse and worse.
Eventually, it emerged just the horrible scale of the injuries to Georgina that were allied to trying to find out her PIN number for her credit card.
We established about 5 hours after discovering her body that somebody had attempted to use that Cashpoint card at a local ATM, and we feel that they were trying to get the PIN number out of Georgina.
Police trace CCTV from that local Tesco ATM in nearby Eastleigh, only half a mile away from the murder scene, and see someone attempting to take money out.
They attempted to use the machine a couple of times. I think it swallowed up the card and off it went. So we didn't have a facial image of the person using the ATM machine, but we were confident to say it was a man. And in particular, the user of the ATM machine was wearing a thick fluorescent jacket with a hood up. And the person that approached that clearly knew that that camera was there, because they took all reasonable steps to avoid being seen, keeping their head down, keeping the hood up, etc.
Despite his face being hidden, detectives now have an image of Georgina's killer, and the search for this person intensifies.
This is probably someone who was local or had local connections with Eastleigh. Have we had any offenders that have been released from prison recently in that area on licence? Have we got any registered sex offenders or violent offenders that are in that area? Luckily for me, the duty detective sergeant happened to know that there was a bail hostel called Elderfield House, which was pretty much at the end of the road from Brambridge leading into Otterbourne Village. It's the sort of place that you wouldn't expect to find in an affluent village like Otterbourne or Brambridge, and there are some unpleasant people there.
Behind those trees is Elderfield.
You can just see the rooftop over there.
These are people that had done time in prison, and after their term was over, they've sent them here.
It's a halfway house, basically.
It's a halfway house.
It was somewhere where they could sort of spend time and sort of rehabilitate and get back into normal life. And they would hang around in groups and get very drunk. And it was not nice. It was quite a bit unsettling.
It is of some concern in that you don't know what's going to happen next.
You would often get some of them escape, or they would then get out and they aren't supposed to be out. Danger, I guess it was described as.
Police question the residents of Elderfield to establish their movements on the night of Georgina's murder.
There were 4 people that were unaccounted for that night. I think 3 had come back late. Within 24 hours or so, we declared 4 people as suspects from Elderfield House. And we arrested them, searched their rooms, brought them back to the police station, forensically examined them, and then put them through the interview process.
After hours of questioning, it soon becomes clear to detectives that 3 of the suspects had clear alibis and are released without charge. But the 4th did not return to Elderfield for 24 hours during the night Georgina was murdered. And his clothing is of particular interest to police.
CCTV, it showed this fluorescent jacket, which was really key. And in our search in Elderfield House, we established that one of the residents who was unaccounted for on the night was wearing a big fluorescent jacket. He had previous convictions for murder or manslaughter. So he was of particular interest and excitement to the team at that time.
But police are able to verify the 4th man's alibi, and he is released without charge. And with no suspect or clear motive, fear begins to escalate across the local community.
It's unsettling. It's unknown because the police don't tell you exactly what's happening, especially when they say, well, we haven't found him yet, we're still looking out for him. So where is he?
It was quite scary. My family saying to me, don't go out on your own at night, don't go out to the car park on your own. It definitely makes you change the way you behave, the way you think. For ages, people didn't go to the garden centre. That was really affected by the whole situation, because I just think people thought it was a dangerous area to go to, so they didn't go there.
They were getting more and more concerned and worried that this is someone still here then, is it? Are we to believe that this is a stranger, of someone that was passing through, just happened to pick the cottage, just happened to find that the door was open, going there, carry out this terrible crime, and then just drive away and leave the area utterly and completely, and that's it? Or is it more likely that the perpetrator is still here amongst us?
It's been 1 month since much-loved grandma, Georgina Edmonds, was found murdered in her home in Brambridge, and police are yet to judge anyone for the heinous crime.
It was in the media daily, any newspaper stat you saw it. It was on the news, it was on the radio. We had boards up everywhere, and if you lived in the area as well, you couldn't miss it. Everyone knew what was going on.
I think at the time there was an urgency to get this one done, to get it sorted.
The only sighting detectives have is by a Tesco ATM machine in nearby East Leigh. And so the investigation to find this man spotted on CCTV escalates.
We knew that Georgina's card had been attempted to be used, then obviously that, for me, becomes an area of concentration for house to house. So we had police patrols in the area, certainly at the Tesco Express. We wanted to capture anyone that was there at the material time, so we obviously pulled the CCTV from the petrol station itself. We could read all the registration numbers of the cars coming in. And then we had the obvious houses sort of adjacent to Tesco Express and then right opposite. And so I decided that we would focus house to house in that area as well, knocking on doors. Again, good old-fashioned detective work.
And it isn't long before one address catches police attention.
There was a raid on a house that wasn't far from where the cash point had been, where the person in the frame had been using the debit card.
There was a particular address not a million miles away from the ATM machine where a man lived up until the point of around about the 11th of January and then disappeared. The inquiries that we did identified that he was Polish and had gone back to Poland. And he may have also had some previous convictions, so I sent a team out to Poland.
Suddenly, the news story goes international.
We had reports that the police had actually gone out to Poland to carry out inquiries.
There was a lot of media interest in this particular case, and then the media were descending on us, and they would put two and two together and come up with murderer, fled to Poland and all this. Got the community excited, if you like, because they were thinking, oh great, they finally caught that person.
Police question the Polish man regarding his movements on the night Georgina was murdered. Have they finally found their killer?
He was alibied, and also I think through DNA as well, we were able to eliminate him from the inquiry.
With the Polish man in the clear, Hampshire police are back in the UK and back to square one. So they release a clearer version of the CCTV footage to the public and suspect the person is a male aged between 16 and 60 with an estimated height of 5'11". The hunt for this man accelerates to new levels.
We wanted DNA swabs from males matching that description to come forward. Our view was, if you've got nothing to hide, come forward.
You can't force people to do that kind of thing. But what this did, of course, was to add to the suspicion in the community. And they would have come forward because feeling, well, if I don't, then it's going to fall on me. I must admit that in my experience, I've never come across a mass DNA appeal anywhere that I've worked before. It was certainly turning into something that's, a modern-day thriller.
More than 2,000 local men have their DNA swabbed, but there are no immediate results, and the case goes cold. 2.5 years later, and Georgina's killer is still at large. But on the 30th of June, 2010, things take a dramatic turn. An arrest is made. And it's a local man. 31-year-old Matthew Hamlin.
We scrambled to find out who this man is. He's got a history of violence, and he's not a nice guy to know.
Matthew Hamlin was known to police. He'd been known for drug usage and also violence in the past. He had a off-on relationship with a local girl. In fact, he'd had an argument with her and resulted in hitting her with an ironing board, and she moved out of the home. He had quite a bad drug habit at that time, using cocaine, and we understand he also racked up numerous debts as a result of his drug usage. And so that kind of fitted the profile of somebody high on drugs, desperate, probably not really thinking what they're doing.
You can understand that the police would be interested in him. He used to walk his dog along the riverbank there and would know the area quite well. So he fitted in one of the profiles, shall we say, for the police.
But what exactly led to Matthew's arrest?
One particularly interesting subject came to them with a couple of bits of evidence. The first was that despite he denying that he had been in the area on that particular day and time, his phone records were showing that he actually was there.
This person had a mobile phone, and what we could show was that their phone was bouncing off the same cell mast on the afternoon of the 11th of January.
With Hamlin in custody, police waste no time in recording his every word when his mum visits.
The other thing is I might have an alibi for it as well. When they first interviewed me, I ain't got a clue where I was. And Sarah got out her diary and she flipped through, looked at the date and she said, yeah, you was with me.
I can speak to Sarah.
Yeah. See if she's still going to make that.
I think she was trying to be helpful for him. And I guess, if you think about it, you don't want to think your child is responsible for doing such a grave crime. And so I would imagine she was desperate.
But I haven't spoken to them for ages. I haven't fallen out of them, but I ain't spoken to them. So whether she's still going to say that or not, but I can't remember it. I was off my head all the time. I was drunk. I don't know what I was doing. I don't know where I was 2.5 years ago. I struggled where I was last week.
It was quite clear in that recording that he was trying to manufacture an alibi at that time that would take him out of the area at the material time when Georgina was murdered.
As well as Hamlin's mobile phone pinging on a nearby mast, linking him to the scene, new evidence comes to light, which police believe is even more conclusive.
The other bit was partial DNA that was found on the rolling pin, and also, I believe, on a small part of her clothing. That was a partial match to this particular subject. Putting the two together, and he came right to the top.
Eventually, the scientists were able to show some components of that mixed profile were 2,600 times more likely to be attributable to Matthew Hamlin. We were fairly confident that Hamlin was responsible.
After a manhunt that lasted years, it seems police have finally found their man. And Matthew Hamlin is charged with Georgina's murder. Matthew pleads not guilty, and 10 months later, the trial begins at Winchester Crown Court.
You're nervous, you're excited, you've got the victim's family up in the gallery, your QC opens up the case, you hear what's being said, and you sit back and think, that sounds pretty good. If I'm on the jury, I'd be thinking, guilty.
The prosecution lay out a mountain of evidence against Matthew Hamlin. And after a 3-month trial, the jury returns with its verdict.
When the call came through, I remember the news desk saying to me, it's not guilty. At that moment, it's one of those moments in the newsroom where you get that stunned silence.
They don't happen that often. So when they do, and when it's such an important case like that, you can't really describe it. It's just a punch in the guts, Yes, professionally you're disappointed for yourself, and your team, but it's the family, you really feel for. And you do question, could we have done more, Did we have the wrong person, Is there somebody out there that's done this that we haven't caught?
And you think about the community. The community had lived with this for 4 years. They believed that the monster amongst them had been caught and was now going to get his just desserts. And now it wasn't. And according to the court, he's not the monster at all. Well, who is the monster?
Despite a 2.5-year manhunt and becoming Hampshire Constabulary's most expansive investigation, Matthew Hamlin has been acquitted of Georgina Edmonds' murder, leaving her family, the community and the police feeling devastated and in shock.
Well, we're back now to square one. The mystery continues. The courts have cleared him. So who is it? Is it my neighbour? Is it my friend? Is it someone in my family? Is it someone I work with?
You always have to be open-minded, and you have to accept that actually Hamlin didn't do it. There is someone else out there.
With the case unsolved, the possibility of the killer getting away with murder looms over police.
Are the police looking for anyone else? Is the case closed? And the police were quite adamant that the case remained open, that they were carrying on their investigations.
So obviously we have a debrief. We'll meet with counsel as well. We'll speak with the family. We will conduct a review of that investigation to see if there were anything we missed, anything we could have done, mainly because so lessons can be learned, because once somebody's been acquitted, that's it.
Detectives go back to the drawing board and relook at all the evidence they have collated over the years and examine what went wrong.
We spent millions of pounds on this investigation, the most expensive investigations that Hampshire police have ever run, and the forensic budget was through the roof.
Beforehand, they had looked for his DNA on the marble rolling pin, but graphically there was so much of Georgina Edmonds' blood on that blurred everything, and they got just a partial sample. And then from another small part of her clothing, where again it was a partial sample. I mean, you're asking a jury to put someone away for life on the grounds of circumstantial evidence and also partial DNA. It's too cloudy, and I think juries can then look at it and say, can I actually send a man away for life on evidence here which is not the strongest?
Police spend years looking for new techniques to forensically identify a killer, and they eventually come across a recent form of DNA testing called YSTR, which extracts the male DNA profile from a full DNA profile.
It's a simple process, and it's almost sellotape on clothing and points of the body to remove skin cells. So it's fairly early on in the exhibits that we're taking of the left sleeve of Georgina's blouse, which would have had skin cells on there. And so the decision was taken to look at those skin cells and examine them, because we hadn't done so far. We'd done the waistband but not the sleeve. And then obviously it went for analysis, number crunching, etc. And it came back with a full male profile.
On Thursday, 30th of October 2014, police make an announcement. They have arrested and charged a suspect for the murder of Georgina Edmonds. As a new trial looms, people want to know, who is in the frame? None other than Matthew Hamlin.
This is incredible. They're going to put him back on trial. It wouldn't have been allowed because double jeopardy meant you could not be tried for the same crime in this country that had only been changed a few years prior to that, which enabled this to actually happen.
Despite double jeopardy rules changing in 2003 and a new stack of DNA evidence, how did detectives manage to get Hamlin's charge over the line?
It's not an easy thing to do for obvious reasons. The defence argued that it's not new evidence, you had it all along, you just chose not to examine it and find it. But actually, it's not evidence until you've actually turned it into evidence. And that was the ruling of Sir Brian Leveson, who heard at the Court of Appeal, who then quashed the acquittal, or were able to then go for a retrial.
January 2016, exactly 8 years after Georgina's murder, the second trial of Matthew Hamlin begins at Winchester Crown Court. The prosecution lay out all their evidence once again, including their new secret weapon, the YSTR DNA technique.
We're hoping for a better outcome this time.
It's 1 in 26 million, that DNA, that it's not him.
And when you describe that, there's 26 million to 1 is this person, I think it was a fairly easy decision for the jury to make. Layered on top of that was obviously he was a local person, violent background, and obviously the phone was bouncing off the mast at the time.
Despite presenting their new evidence in court, there are many in the community who are unconvinced that Matthew Hamlin is the killer. At the time of the second trial, Matthew is a changed man, leaving behind his days of drug-taking, working full-time as an electrician, and raising his family. And after a grueling 6-week trial, the jury retires to consider the verdict.
When you do get to court, and the prosecution and the defence have had their say and the judge has summed up, you still get a bit nervous, even though you just know in your heart of hearts that it's a really, really strong case.
So we can't speculate, we can't talk to people about, what do you think this time? Do you think he's going to get off a second time?
On the 23rd of February 2016, the jury return with a verdict.
8 years after Georgina Edmonds, aged 77 years, was found dead at her home in Banbridge, Matthew Hamlin has today been found guilty of her brutal murder.
It was just a sense of relief and just great work, and so many people, bear in mind this investigation had gone on for years really, and so many people got involved in that investigation, but it was just such a nice feeling.
Throughout this entire investigation, We have been absolutely determined to prove, beyond reasonable doubt, who committed this horrific crime. After the discovery of new evidence and presenting it to the Court of Appeal, we were able to try Matthew Hamlin again for the murder of Georgina Edmonds. The whole prosecution team were determined to find justice for Georgina, and today that has been achieved.
Being stood there listening to Harry address the media and just say some really nice words about me and my colleagues and Hampshire Police and all the work that we had done to get justice for the family. So yeah, just a great feeling.
The entire team of police officers, police staff, prosecution barristers, forensic scientists and colleagues from the Crown Prosecution Service have been absolutely dedicated to putting together the best possible case that could be put before the court and the jury. Every moment has been worth it to see justice finally served and the killer of Georgina Edmonds behind bars. Thank you.
With Matthew Hamlin finally behind bars, the question that still puzzles the community is why would he want to end the life of Georgina Edmonds so brutally, torturing her before battering her to death?
Who can say, and it's difficult for me to speculate. Well, we know now from the court case, although he's never admitted it, that he was short of money, that he had walked along the riverbank and he had found his way in the cottage, whether that was just by pure chance, whether he had seen her walking her dogs and had known that she was gone there and she was a vulnerable old lady. Sadly, whether he would have known or not that the door was left open when he went in. He had tortured her to reveal the number for her debit card by stabbing her something like 27 times and then just leave her there, tie her up or something like that. But then it all got, who knows what it is. But I think what we can tell is that he is a pretty evil, nasty guy who will spend 30 years in prison.
And after 8 long years of fear, can normal life return for the local community?
It's so close to reality for us here that, you know, it's traumatic for all of us in the village.
They're vulnerable too. They're so trusting. I know we all felt very, very sorry for her. Yeah, very sorry.
This program contains depictions of violence. Please be aware that this program also contains themes of suicide.
When I was on the run, Dina was psyching me up by saying, the mafia only want to kill us if you're alive. She was saying, if you committed suicide or pretend suicide, can we take photos?
You would fake committing suicide, and then no one would be after you anymore.
There'd be a new identity for me to pick up because Lee Wyatt has killed himself. There's a special hangman's noose. You put it over your shoulders and arms. And you've got to be a very good actor to sort of make the disguise.
Did you ever feel like she was suggesting you should actually commit suicide?
Yeah, on quite a few occasions. I was her biggest problem because I'm still alive and I can fill in all the gaps.
You better stop the things you do.
remember I was sitting in my office and someone called Sean McDonald, who was a DC that I'd never met, walked in. And he said, I've done some profiling of you and you worked on a lot of murders. And I said, I have. He said, I think you're pretty good at murder. I said, well, thank you. And he started talking about someone called Julian Webb. A few years earlier, Julian had unexpectedly died. His wife, Dina, straight away said that he committed suicide, but everybody took the view that this was a suspicious death. Sean and a lot of the officers felt that there was far more to this, and Sean gave me the files in the hope that I could further that view. Dina told the paramedics that Julian had died literally 15 minutes before the ambulance arrived, and yet when they went to move the body had rigor mortis. And that rang alarm bells because rigor mortis takes far longer than 15 minutes to set in. He died long before she told us that he died. And then we got the A&E doctor who thought Dina was faking her grief. Really, really unusual. Finally, I have never in my life heard of anybody claiming for a partner's money the day after an unexpected death. It was quite obvious there was more to this case than met the eye. And now Dina's first husband, Lee White, had reappeared. Lee had been missing for about 4 years, and he was accused of seriously assaulting Dina. And his disappearance appeared to be linked to that. He was arrested for benefit fraud using an alias of Colin Mitchell. There were quite a few things to talk to him about. And we were hoping that some light on what happened to Julian would be shed in the interview.
I've been living alone for 4 years, on the run. Dina was living with Julian, and there I was, moving from place to place, and sometimes living rough, really rough, and I was desperate and broken. I didn't tell anyone about the mafia, because they'd think I'm mad. So that's the sort of thing you have to keep quiet. Told no one nothing. And for all those years, I hadn't seen my son, Darren, because Dina told me it wasn't safe. I'd lost all perspective on truth and what was lies. I got the impression she's trying to make me mad. That I was probably bordering on that non-sanity thing simply because of what I've gone through. I made these dozens of little notes. I would write things like, is Dina lying to me? And then another one saying, has all this story about Disney been a lie? Every time I spoke to her, I would say, how long is this going to keep on going on for? What's happening? I want answers. And that's when she said, Julian is dead. And I said, well, how is that? Why is that? And then she put the phone down on me. So obviously I was asking too many questions. Took a deep breath, and I thought, so I'm not going to be a protection squad, taking over the identity of Julian Webb. I tried to ring her again after that, but she wasn't picking up.
Did you think for even a moment that she might have killed him?
No. No, I didn't. I didn't think it was in her. A week later, she contacted me, and then that's when she strung up the thing about the States. You've got to get yourself over there with a passport. And she said, you'll see Darren. You'll see him in the hotel. She said, we're going to be starting a new life together as a family unit. I said, at last. But she said it wasn't safe to travel together. So she said, I'll meet you over there. That's when the brain started ticking over, thinking, there's something not quite right here. But I need to try and make a life, and I need to try and get my son back. So I went anyway. She came into the hotel room. And I'm thinking, now we can have an embrace together. And straight away she would come out with, do you have any money? And I said, I've got no money. She wasn't happy with that at all. And I thought, this isn't right. And she said, I'll go back and I'll get Darren now. And I thought, what the hell is going on? I need to follow her when she leaves and see if she's telling the truth. I ducked out the rear entrance, climbed over a fence, and I saw her heading towards a young man. They kissed, and that's when it suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks. She's carrying on like I never existed. I felt sick, and I realised the whole thing was a sham. All these years, Lee, you've been manipulated and used, and everything has been a lie. I was thinking, I need to see the parents. I need to ask them questions. I've got no money. So I signed on at the job centre.
You signed on as?
As Colin Mitchell. And then I had a letter saying, can you come into the office? We believe there's something not quite right. And I said, right, game is up.
He had been sleeping rough, sleeping in bus shelters. He looked a bit dishevelled, should we say. But, you know, he's not got tattoos on his face or anything like that. He was just a very ordinary sort of looking bloke.
We suddenly got Lee Wyatt. I couldn't believe it. We knew that Lee and Dina were still married legally when Dina married Julian. And we knew Lee was at the house in Yapton about the time that Julian died. Dina accused Lee of stealing money, of breaking into a house, of assault, and we had this awful allegation of sexual assault against him. These are serious allegations. He would easily be facing 5 years or more in prison.
As soon as the door shut, I was frightened. I was shaking. I thought, well, what story do I tell? I did what I did because I thought I needed to save the lives of my son and Dina. But whether or not they would believe me, I don't know.
And I said, we're going to go through this from start to finish. So let's start at the beginning and take me through it.
Yeah. 86. And that was probably the very start of it all. We had the first year together, which were quite wonderful, as in we were going places. And then Dina was pregnant. She said, this isn't right, this is uncomfortable. And the medical staff declared that the baby was dead.
How many weeks pregnant was she?
About 36 weeks. So it was like, you know, full term. And Dina had to go through the motions of birth. Such was the exhaustion of doing it, Dina's heart stopped. I heard what we call the death throttle. The sister then ran out to get the machine to give her a shock. And I shouted, "Don't do this to me. Put a life together." I whacked her in the heart. And then there was a big deep breath that came from her. The sister rushed in and said, "She's alive, she's all right." The baby came out. And I remember saying, "It is our child, our baby," just to say goodbye to it. The name was Louise Amanda Wyatt, and that would be my initials. So it was a part of me dying with her. Yeah. I wanted to pick up the baby, and she wouldn't allow it. She was just saying, "Don't look at it. Don't touch it." I never once touched the baby, and nor did she. And I didn't touch Louise because I didn't want to upset Dina.
Did something change that day?
Yeah. That to me was a moment where Dina died. And I honestly to God think Dina came back as truly another person. Everyone gave Dina the sympathies, and quite rightly so, but she just carried on as normal, as if nothing had happened. And within weeks, she insisted she had to get pregnant again. So we did that, and Darren was obviously on his way. Darren, he was £6'7" when he was born. But it took 5 days for him before he could come out, because he became a blue baby. So he got put into an oxygen box tank. And I'm thinking, I can't believe this is happening again. From that point onwards, I became fearful that I was going to lose him too.
I think what Lee went through made him feel vulnerable.
Do you think that Darren was used as a way of controlling Lee?
Oh yeah, in that sort of situation. His currency.
How soon after Darren was born did Dina tell you about the mafia?
It's got to be within weeks. He was a little baby. I believed that the Irish mafia wanted to kill all of us. This was hitmen, and Dina said there was a price on my head, £100,000. They wanted all the money from the cuddly toy business, from the rights to Shaun the Leprechaun.
But you must have said to her, "What do you mean, the mafia?" Like, what was your reaction?
Yeah, well, I had heard of stories like the Irish Mafia before. When I heard Irish Mafia, I just assumed the IRA. At the time, there was a war of the IRA against people on the mainland. And the day we got married, the Grand Hotel in Brighton got bombed. And I just thought, this is a dangerous organisation. I was frightened.
It's quite hard to imagine. There are numerous people out there trying to kill your newborn baby, your wife, yourself.
Yep. And you're always looking at someone as, well, are they the enemy or are they a good person? Sounds crazy, but every time we came out of the house, I would go through the standard security check, looking under the cars for bombs. I kept track of the number plates in the back of the rearview mirror. I would write it down on a little notepad to see if I had the same number plate following me. Every time we went out, I did fear for our lives every hour of every day.
It's such a crazy story. It's extremely hard to believe, but you validate a lot of what he said happened.
Yeah. How do you manage to isolate somebody that effectively, and where does the drive come from to want to do that to another human being? But by that point, he is completely controlled by Dina. And we had no idea. Dina struck me as being a very well-balanced, perfectly normal human being. Dina was contacting my Auntie Jean with phone calls. Very, very odd visit without Lee. And there was the constant blaming of Lee being the one that didn't want anything to do with his mother or the family, and she was the innocent one doing her best to communicate. Well, you're only given one side of the information. What do you believe? There was no reason not to believe her at all.
Dina had said that my mother and family had been infiltrated by the mafia, and that's why contact ceased from me. And I believed her. Within 2 years, I'd lost my grandfather, my father, and then I had the stillborn of Louise. And together with her bringing up these stories of all the mafia, that was just juggling about in my brain. Perhaps I was having a mental breakdown, not just at that particular minute, that week, but just gradually building up.
Lee I saw as being a strong, well-adjusted person. Successful, knew his own mind, knew what he wanted out of life, and he absolutely got torn apart by somebody's manipulation.
I absolutely couldn't believe the story I was hearing. You think this can't have happened?
You have to unravel all the stories that are there, and they're so intertwined and so difficult to unravel.
I thought, well, are they against me or are they with me? I had a lot to tell them. I'm the victim of her lies.
Nobody had had any contact with Lee whatsoever. He was just a ghost. Just a ghost. Lee was an only child, and he was very, very dear to his parents. You know, I was angry at the time. And in my naivety, I just thought, I'm going to go and find Lee and have a go. And I'm going to find out why he's not talking to his mother. I drove down a very long lane to get to their house. And nobody was more surprised than Dina when she opened that door and I was stood there. And she told me Lee was away and he wouldn't be back. So I might as well go.
Away where?
Didn't elaborate on that at all.
Dina told me, just hide. I was just huddled up in the corner so that I wouldn't be acknowledging myself to him.
Why did you accept what Dina said, that Lee wasn't there? Did you not feel like you wanted to have a look around inside? And
I should have done. But at that point we had no reason to disbelieve that wasn't the case. You know, we weren't privy to what was effectively the psychological warfare that was going on aimed at Lee. Lee was part of a journey for Dina. I think she was learning how to control people to the extent that she controlled Lee. And then what she did post that became the murderess.
By then, Dina didn't really talk about Lee. I guess I didn't really ask. I knew that Lee had assaulted her, but I didn't know anything else. Lee was definitely out of the picture. And all of a sudden, she's talking about someone called Julian. Suddenly, she was Julian's partner. I think this one day, I remember being in the front room. I look out the window, there's Dina, and this person walking down. Hello, this is Julian. Oh, hello, pleased to meet you. It kind of didn't make sense. But it wasn't like, she didn't say, oh, I'm having an affair, which, that's what would be classed at in theory. But it was like, suddenly they were married. I've never seen two people that would be so different. But it was very much, to me, that she was in charge.
Her father said, Dina's just married. Some chap. And I said, what do you mean married? Well, married. She can't marry. She said, I'm married. There's no divorce. She had told her parents that we was in the proceeds of divorcing one another. But it wasn't true. She married him vigorously. She actually put on the marriage certificate spinster. At the time, I thought it was just part of this plan to protect us. A week before Dina married Julian, she said to me, you have to be on the run without us. And she told me I couldn't stay as Lee Wyatt. I had to have another identity. It felt like I was an undercover operative. So I'd read a couple of books. There was the Day of the Jackal, I think it was. This guy was going through the countryside, killing all manner of people, taking cars and money. So I pulled out a map of the UK and I quite literally hovered my arm and a finger and a pencil around this. I spun myself in a circle to make myself giddy, and the first bit I hit was Newquay. Wasn't quite on Newquay. It was near Newquay.
In those days, the amusement arcades were in their heyday. So it would be pushers and things like that. And then the cranes, which was the grabbers. You pick it up and win every time. What we used to do is take the weight of the toy, hold it in there, and then just ease it off so that basically the grab would do that. One day, the person walked through the front door, long hair and a beard, asked if there's any employment available. I offered him a job fixing machines. I asked him his name, he said he was Colin Mitchell.
Hi, I'm Colin Mitchell.
So who was Colin Mitchell?
Well, he's someone that worked in the hotel trade, and I probably used to see him every day.
So you knew him?
So I knew him, yeah.
And you stole his name?
And I used his name, managed to get a passport in the name of Colin John Mitchell.
How did you do that?
I just applied for it. It's funny because there was a film on called The Fugitive, and I saw that at the cinema, and I thought, God, is that me? I'm not going to be jumping off of rivers and helicopters and stuff like that, but that's how I felt.
And I'd say, Colin, can you do this? Basically, he wouldn't answer to Colin. Now I know why, yes. Yeah, because he wasn't called Colin.
I was waiting for the threat of the mafia to be gone. Leaving your son behind, obviously, that was quite horrific. So my trust was in Julian and his mates, the protection squad, to look after them too. And Dina always said, yeah, they're doing their jobs. They're looking after us. They're arresting the hitmen, according to her. Well, it turns out Julian became the stepfather sort of thing as a substitute dad. He probably behaved quite well to him. I'm not to know that because no one ever told me anything.
Lee hasn't seen his son for years because of Dina. For a parent to leave their child, this is very extreme action. This is not normal behaviour. I realised what we were looking at was a really controlling relationship. Coercion starts with small control, like, I'll answer the phone, I'll open the door. A month later, it's, I'll access our joint bank account. And the scary nature of coercion is that often the person being controlled doesn't realise it. But it was a complex story, and we had this awful allegation of sexual assault against Lee that we had to put to him.
Roses are red, violence is black, you need our shotgun as a payback.
It's not good. My hands were shaking, my feet were shaking, and I admit to them that I did make that call. She said, you have to make a phone call where you're slagging me off. Then I questioned, and then she said, don't give up on Darren. I said, I'm not giving up on Darren, but you are. You're asking all these questions, and this is this twist that she does. Then I read the sexual assault statement, which she signed. She set me up with a crime I haven't committed. I knew this was serious. And that's when it all came to me. I asked, what date did she say this happened? They gave me the date. It's impossible. I was in Cornwall working on that day. And the detectives looked at each other and they left the room.
Did you attack or abuse Dina?
Not then, and in no other times, whatever. So that wasn't me. That was her mental state. She's just on another level.
I called his old boss, and Lee's alibi checked out. He was 200 miles away when the incidents that she's saying were happening in Yapton when he was working in Cornwall.
Worryingly, she got Lee Wyatt to incriminate himself in numerous offences that he hadn't committed, purely because she coerced him into doing it.
I loved her that much that I would have done anything for her. Love does make you do crazy things.
All been fabricated by Dina. He was never charged with any offences.
Full credit and marks too. Because they believed in an innocent man.
I'd never heard of a case as extreme as Lee Wyatt. It was mind-numbing what she did to him. By the end of the interview, I don't think any of us thought that he was in any way connected to the death of Julian Webb. The way Dina set up Lee Wyatt took a lot of intelligence, took a lot of thought, a lot of planning, premeditation. But we couldn't charge Dina with anything, because at that time, coercive control wasn't a crime. She got away with it, and the damage caused was horrendous.
Of course, I tried to get custody, but the family court judge took her word rather than mine. What she's done isn't against the law, and the police would not help. It's like a civil matter rather than a law enforcement thing. I think Aaron has always lived with his grandmother, Dina's mother, Margaret. I got the impression he's been taught the father is the devil. So he's been brainwashed. Of course he has. I wanted a life together with my son. But I hadn't seen Darren for 3 or 4 years. When I left, all I could say is, "Oh, Daddy will see you again." But I never saw him after that. I remember sending things for his birthday. It was all sent back to me. I've never known what he's done in his life, how he got on at school. Darren is the greatest loss of my life. I was frustrated that we hadn't got a charge. Dina completely destroyed Lee's life, and Julian Webb had been found dead. There is a killer out there, and I was definitely worried. I just knew something else was going to happen. I have no doubt that she'll be looking to meet more victims, and that's what concerns me the greatest. In August of 1995, a man walks into the police station at Worthing and states that he is a victim of Dina as well, and his name is Rob Wade. Dina had mentioned his name several times, blaming him for all kinds of thefts and things, and I thought it was just another made-up name that she'd come up with. But this guy has arrived to tell me he has been coerced to go to America with Dina. And the date that he was there was exactly the same as when Lee met Dina at a hotel. He then followed her back to where she was with a guy. That was Rob Wade. Alarm bells go off straight away. Dina told him that she's dying from cancer and she wanted to go to America for the last 3 months of her life. So he had agreed to take all the money that he could, and they went to Florida. And I sat there open-mouthed. Dina's told Rob the same fabricated story that she told Julian. They had ended up doing moonlight flits from these hotels, motels, and taking anything that they could sort of grab before they left because people were after them. And then Rob told us that she administered something to him in the hotel. He felt a sharp pain in his upper thigh. He believed that she was administering insulin. Dina then went back to England and abandoned him in America. He had no money, no clothes. All he had with him really was his passport and few pennies. And now I'm thinking, could this be what happened to Julian Webb? Was he injected with insulin as well? We're truly shocked by what is going on, that this is her pattern of behaviour. And I realised that we had something much more serious going on here.
Now you've got 3 victims. Can you take action?
At that point, no, there was nothing else we could do to arrest Dina because we had no proof that she had injected Rob. I kept trying to push people to see if there was anything else, because I think everybody had begun to think there may be other victims here. But then the case went quiet.
The 1st of January 2000, there I am on the floor, feet tied, hands tied, and I'm thinking, this is uncomfortable. And she said, I'd just like to tie up and we'll have some fun. And she put a towel over my face. She goes, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you. Bang! A bright flash goes off in your head. It's like someone firing a flash gun in your eyes. Bang! Again. So hard, impact split my head up both sides. I didn't even know I'd been stabbed. Honestly, I just couldn't take it in. What wife just tried to kill you? There was so much blood. It was all over the floor. To her horror, I sat up. I'm literally fighting for my life. I pinned her on the floor. She dropped the knife. And I said to her, what on earth are you doing? And she said, it's all been a lie. All been a lie. There was nothing else said. So, she calls her parents. After about 2.5 hours, her parents turned up. Her mother walks in. First thing she said, Dina, what have you done this time? Her father took me to hospital to get me stitched up. I was lying in a hospital bed. I could see 2 policemen attending another incident. I was trying to get their attention, but her father pulled the curtains. He wouldn't let me. When we got back to the house, Dina had packed some basic stuff. I just assumed she was going off with her parents. And I'm trying to work it all out. I can still hear the ringing of this baseball bat in my head. I really wanted to go to sleep. The pain was incredible. And then I noticed that all the blood had been cleared up. Her mother had cleaned it up. And then they left. They drove her back to Devon.
So I'm in the DS's office, tells me to take a seat, and we're going to talk about a job that's been pulled in the day before. Richard Thompson says he has been assaulted by his wife, and her name is Dina Thompson. I just went, fuck. Dina Thompson was also Dina Webb and Dina Wyatt. I thought, this can't be happening again. Immediately, police officers were sent to the address. But because Richard had waited so long to contact us, it had been 3 days since the alleged attack. We were playing catch-up. By the time we get to do the bathroom, Richard told us, Mum has already cleaned up all the blood that's in there. He would never clean a scene ever like that, ever, and somebody had.
This is a crime scene. The man nearly died. It stretches belief. Lost a lot of evidence. The golden hour, as we call it, had been and gone. The logical person would dial 999. Richard had wasted 3 days and allowed the scene to be destroyed. Unbelievable.
Not only have we lost all the evidence that could give us clear proof of what had happened, we had another problem. Richard doesn't want to press charges. I was shocked.
I was in a real dilemma because if he didn't want to prosecute, Dina could go off again and do this to someone else. This woman is out there and she could do it again. She's dangerous.
If you have been affected by any of the issues raised in this programme, help is available online at sky.com/viewer support.